In the last few days, human rights organisations have called for a ban on fully autonomous weapon systems. This is rising from the use of remotely piloted so-called drones or remotely piloted air systems that have been used both in theatres of operations such as Afghanistan and Iraq, but also by intelligence agencies in the Yemen and in Pakistan. The ban is looking to prevent the development of a fully autonomous weapon system that would be able to select targets by itself and to drop weapon systems without any human intervention whatsoever. In some ways, this is rather preemptive. If you look at the evolution of new air platforms, a number of countries in the West are looking to procure the Joint Strike Fighter, which will be in service for at least another 30 years. And efforts to develop unmanned combat air vehicles, which are moving further down the route of autonomy, will not be coming into service until the mid-2020s, if not 2030s. And even then, there will always remain a human in the loop, even if that person is a legal advisor and doesn't have an operational role per se, such as a pilot or a weapons systems operator. So to say that we need to ban them now is rather preemptive. I think there are concerns about the way that remotely piloted air systems have been used in recent years. There's a concern that politicians may feel more able to use these types of systems because there are no pilots to put at risk. But in some ways, then the ban is misplaced. It's not the technology that needs to be restricted. It's the way that that leaders or military officials are choosing to use such systems. The question is, are those systems going to be more precise than a human in the loop? If we have every confidence that they are, then it would be unethical not to use such systems. Look at the way that autonomous systems have evolved in civil air systems. There's a collision avoidance system called TCAS that most aircraft use. In the past, pilots had the choice to listen to the TCAS or not. That led to collisions. And so now the advice to all pilots is only to rely on the autonomous system if you want to survive and if you want your aircraft to survive with all passengers on board. So again, to ban the technology without testing whether it is better than the current system or not is rather premature. At the moment, the debate about whether to use drones or remotely piloted air systems vice piloted aircraft is about the idea that somebody who is 5,000 miles away from the theatre of operation would feel disengaged from what he's doing and therefore is more likely to pull the trigger than someone who is flying in a fast jet or other air platform over the theatre of operation. Actually, the reverse is true. A remotely piloted or a pilot who sits in a cabin 5,000 miles away actually has on his shoulder an intelligence officer, has access to all the intelligence in theatre, and also is much more scrutinised than a pilot who flies his aircraft over theatre. Because of the concerns about such systems, there are far more people involved in the chain of command or in the kill chain for a remotely piloted air system than there are for manned platforms. So in some ways, you might say that it's more ethical to use remotely piloted air systems. Again, what is intuitive with regards to fully autonomous weapon systems may not actually be true from an ethical point of view when you test the systems and compare it to what is already being used today. So while there are no fully autonomous offensive systems, there are fully autonomous defensive systems, most particularly on ships, which have about an 8-second period from the time an anti-ship missile is launched against the ship to the time it hits the ship to be able to defend themselves. There's also the phalanx system, which has been used to protect bases and ground forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. This also autonomously detects incoming fire, either from mortars or missiles, and autonomously fires back at the point of origin. No one would agree that that is an unethical system. It is protecting forces, and most people would want to make sure that their forces are suitably defended against.